Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are not just reading a book. We are effectively sitting on a leather couch, dimming the lights, and conducting a kind of psychoanalysis of one of the most complex figures in all of Western history.
We certainly are.
We are tackling St. Augustine's Confessions. And before you tune out because you hear the word saint and think this is going to be some dry Sunday school lesson, let me just stop you right there.
Please do. Because if you approach Augustine thinking you're going to get a dusty, a list of dogmas, you're going to be so shocked by what you actually find.
Oh, completely.
This is a man who, frankly, makes modern memoirists look a bit guarded.
Guarded, that's the perfect word.
Yeah.
We're so used to the tell-all book today, right? Celebrity memoir, scandals, all of it. But Augustine wrote this around 397 AD, and it is arguably the first time in history anyone tried to map the interior landscape of the human mind with this level of honesty.
Exactly. I mean, he talks about his sex life, his petty crimes, his immense ego, his mommy issues. It's all in there.
It really is the first modern autobiography. Before Augustine, when people like, say, Julius Caesar wrote about themselves, what did they write about?
Their campaigns, their victories, the external world. What they did. Augustine turned the camera inward. He wasn't just interested in what he did. He was completely obsessed with why he did it.
The motivation.
The motivation. He's exploring memory, desire, the nature of time itself, the very structure of the human personality. It's a psychological document as much as it is a religious one.
And our mission today is to trace that journey. We are focusing on books I through 6, and we're using the Outler translation as our main source. This covers his life from birth up to about age 30.
Right. So we're going from a screaming infant in North Africa to a disillusioned, anxious, incredibly ambitious professor of rhetoric in Milan.
A 30-year-old man who, on the outside, looks like he's made it. He has a great career. But on the inside, he is absolutely crumbling.
And to understand why he matters so much, you have to look at where he's standing in history. The introduction to the book calls him a colossus, and it's for a good reason. He's straddling two completely different worlds.
We hear that term colossus a lot with him. What does that landscape actually look like for him on the ground?
Okay, so imagine you're standing on a shifting tectonic plate. He is living right at the tail end of the Roman Empire and the very beginning of the Middle Ages.
So everything is in flux.
Everything. The old classical world, the world of Cicero, of Virgil, of the pagan gods, it's fading. Not just intellectually, but physically. The New World Christianity, the medieval order, is rising, but it's still chaotic, it's unformed, it's full of competing sects and ideas.
And Augustine is trying to bridge that gap.
He is the bridge. He's a Roman citizen. He is steeped in Latin culture and philosophy, and he's trying to synthesize all of that with this relatively new faith from the Middle East, Christianity.
The book calls it an unsystematic synthesis, right? It's not clean, it's not neat.
Oh, it is incredibly messy. And that messiness is what makes it so human and so compelling. He isn't writing a systematic theology here, not in this book. He's writing a prayer.
The whole book is addressed to God.
The whole thing. But it's also a psychological profile of a man trying to find a stable point of truth in a world that is, literally and metaphorically falling apart around him.
Okay, let's jump into the text itself. We have to start with the opening. It's probably one of the most famous sentences in all of Western literature.
It has to be. Thou hast made us for thyself, and restless is our heart until it comes to rest in thee.
Fecisti nos ate et inquietum est cor nostrum. Restless is our heart. That just hits so hard. It doesn't feel ancient at all. It feels like the definition of modern anxiety.
It really does.
We are all scrolling, searching, buying, swiping, just restless constantly.
Precisely. And Augustine identifies this restlessness, not as some flaw in our biology, but as a feature of our design. His argument is it's ontological. He believes that because humans were created by the infinite, by God, we have an infinite capacity for desire.
We're built to contain the infinite.
We are built to contain the infinite. So when we try to fill that infinite cavern with finite things, money, sex, fame, career, even other people, it just doesn't work. It can't work.
It's like trying to fill the Grand Canyon with marbles.
That's a perfect analogy. You can put a lot of marbles in there, but it will never, ever be full.
So in his view, the restlessness is a signal. It's not a bug. It's a feature.
It's a homing beacon. He's saying that the anxiety we feel is actually a sign of our dignity. If we could be satisfied by a new car or promotion, we would be much smaller creatures. The very fact that we aren't satisfied means we are made for something bigger, something more.
But immediately after this beautiful, poetic opening, he just hits a wall. He starts spiraling into this deep philosophical paradox about the nature of God. He asks, how can I call upon God to come into me?
Yeah, this is where we see Augustine the philosopher, not just Augustine the poet. He's grappling with what you could call the containment problem.
Right.
If God is infinite, if God is already everywhere, then he is already inside Augustine. So what does it even mean to ask him to come? Augustine says, I would not exist if you were not in me. But then he immediately flips it and says, or rather, I would not exist if I were not in you.
It's a total mind bender. And he starts rattling off these attributes of God that seem to just cancel each other out. He says God is most high, yet most humble, most secret, yet most truly present.
Changing all things, yet never new, never old, always working, ever at rest.
It feels like he's trying to break his own brain. He's using language to point at something that language can't actually capture or contain.
He is. He's demonstrating the failure of the human intellect to grasp the divine. And this is a key theme for the young Augustine. He is trying to understand God before he accepts God.
He wants to fit God into a logical box.
He does. And the biggest hurdle he faces, and we see this again and again through the first half of the book, is that he cannot imagine a substance that isn't physical.
This is the materialist trap, as they call it.
Yes. For the first 30 years of his life, Augustine thought that for something to be real, it had to have extension in space. It had to have mass. It had to be a thing.
So when he thought of God, he didn't think of a pure spirit.
No. He thought of a physical, albeit very fine, substance. He uses that famous analogy of the ocean and the sponge.
Right. Can you unpack that a little?
Sure. He imagined God as this vast, infinite sea of light, and the physical universe as a giant sponge floating in that sea. The sea permeates the sponge, right? It's inside it and outside it at the same time.
Okay, I see.
But in that model, God is still a physical substance, just a finer, maybe gas-like one. He just could not conceive of a truly spiritual reality, something with no size, no shape, no color, but that was fully real. This cognitive block is what keeps him stumbling for decades.
Okay, so let's rewind to where this stumbling begins. Book 1. His childhood. Now, usually when people write about their childhood, it's all nostalgia. Oh, the sun was warmer then. I was so innocent. Augustine looks at his own infancy and basically says, I was a monster.
He really does. There's zero sentimentality about childhood in this book. He looks at a cradle and he sees original sin in action.
He argues that the only difference between a screaming baby and a wicked tyrant is what? The size of their limbs.
Exactly, the physical weakness. He
Yeah.
gives that specific and kind of disturbing example of the jealous baby. He's watching an infant who isn't even speaking yet. This baby watches his foster brother nursing at the same breast. And Augustine describes the first baby turning livid with jealousy.
He says the baby's face turns pale with a bitter look. Now think about that. He's looking at an infant and seeing calculated malice.
It's incredible. And Augustine asks, is this innocence, to begrudge your own brother a milk supply that is abundant for both of you? He argues that if that baby had the physical strength of a man, he would kill the other baby to get the milk.
So the only thing stopping him is his own weakness.
The only reason he doesn't strike the other child is because he's too weak to lift his arm. His argument is, the weakness of infant limbs is innocent, not the infant mind.
It's a devastating critique of the whole blank slate theory of human nature.
It is. Augustine believes we come into the world already broken, already selfish, already curved inward on ourselves. We don't have to be taught to be greedy. We have to be taught to share. It's a default setting.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, though. Is he just projecting? I mean, he's a middle-aged bishop looking back and writing this. Is he reading his own adult guilt and his theology back into a baby's natural survival instinct?
That is the big question, and it's a fair one. A modern psychologist would absolutely say, Augustine, relax, it's just biological competition, it's an attachment response. But for Augustine, theology and psychology are the same thing.
He wouldn't separate them.
He wouldn't. He sees that survival instinct, that primal drive to put me first, even at the expense of others, as the very root of all sin. So whether you call it evolution or original sin, the observable behavior is the same. Self over other.
Then he moves on to talk about learning to speak. And again, it's not this happy process of mama and dada. He frames it as a power struggle.
It is entirely about the will. He realizes that inside him there were these powerful desires. He wanted a toy, he wanted food, he wanted comfort. But the outside world, his parents, the nurses, they couldn't read his mind.
He's trapped.
He was prisoner in his own head. So he learned to speak purely as a tool to impose his will on the outside world.
It's weaponized communication then. I speak so I can get what I want.
Exactly that. It wasn't about connection, it was about dominion.
Mhm.
He says, I flung my limbs about and made sounds to get my will obeyed. And this really sets the stage for his entire career as a rhetorician, a master of using words to manipulate reality and get his way.
Speaking of rhetoric, let's move to his education. He goes to school and he hates it. Specifically, he hates Greek.
He detested Greek. He says it was absolute drudgery. He was threatened with beatings if he didn't learn it. The repetition, the grammar drills, it just killed his spirit.
But he loved Latin literature. He loved the story.
Oh, he adored it. And this is where he brings up Dido. He was forced to read Virgil's Aeneid.
Yeah.
And there's that famous tragic section where Queen Dido kills herself because the hero Aeneas leaves her. And Augustine admits he wept and wept for Dido.
He was completely caught up in it.
Totally. But here is the pivot, and this is classic Augustine. He looks back at his younger self, crying over this fictional character, and he asks, what is more miserable than a wretch who has no pity for himself, weeping for Dido, dead for love of Aeneas, but weeping not for himself, dying for lack of love for God?
Wow. That is a brutal takedown of the entire education system of his day.
It is.
He's saying, you taught me to have these intense emotional reactions to fake tragedies while I was living a real spiritual tragedy and didn't even notice.
He's critiquing the sentimentalism of art. We love to cry at movies. We love to feel sad when we read a novel. It makes us feel human, feel sensitive. But Augustine says this is often just a distraction.
Emotional tourism.
That's a great way to put it. We use the fictional emotions to avoid dealing with the real state of our own souls.
He also points out the hypocrisy of the adults around him, the teachers. He says they beat him for playing ball and wasting time, but what were they doing?
They were playing business. He calls their adult careers and ambitions nugae, which means trifles, nonsense. He says the games of the young are called business by the old.
He saw right through it.
He did. He says if a teacher lost a debate with a colleague, he was more torn up by professional jealousy than Augustine was when he lost a ball game. But the teacher felt completely justified in beating the boy for playing. Augustine sees the charade. The adult world isn't serious. It's just a playground with higher stakes and a lot more vanity.
And more pretension. There's that incredible observation he makes about barbarisms.
Oh, this is so profound and so modern. He notes that in his society, men were more afraid of committing a grammatical error, dropping an H or mispronouncing a word, than they were of hating their neighbor.
That feels incredibly relevant to today, especially with social media. You can destroy someone's reputation, you can be unbelievably cruel, but God forbid you use the wrong terminology or make a typo.
Exactly. It's the elevation of form over substance. It's etiquette over morality. As long as you speak eloquently, you can be a monster on the inside. But if you speak clumsily, you're an outcast. Augustine is exposing the deep shallowness of Roman society, which valued the aesthetic of the good man over the reality of the good heart.
This leads us perfectly into the most famous incident of his youth, the pear tree. This is in book 2.
The anatomy of a sin.
And it seems so small, so petty on the surface. He's 16 years old. He's hanging out with a gang of what he calls young scoundrels. It's late at night, and they decide to jump the fence into a neighbor's vineyard and strip a pear tree.
And they take huge loads of them. But here's the crucial detail that obsesses Augustine for chapters. They didn't even want the pears.
He says, I had better pears at home.
Much better.
Yeah.
And they didn't eat them. They took a few bites and threw the rest to the hogs. So Augustine, the psychologist, starts dissecting this. If he didn't do it for the taste and he didn't do it because he was hungry, then why on earth did he do it?
Usually there's a motive, right? A twisted logic. I steal money because I want to buy something. I commit adultery because I desire pleasure. I kill because I want revenge. There's a kind of utility to the sin.
Right. Vice usually mimics virtue in some distorted way. Pride mimics the desire for excellence. Lust mimics a desire for love. But this was different. He comes to the terrifying conclusion that he loved the theft for the sake of the theft.
Gratuitous evil. Doing wrong just for the sake of doing wrong.
He wanted to break the law just to prove that he could. He wanted a perverse kind of liberty, a shadow of omnipotence. By breaking the rule, he felt powerful. I am not bound by your laws. It's a chilling insight because it suggests that deep down, humans can love destruction just because it is destruction.
It's the Joker in The Dark Knight. Some men just want to watch the world burn. Augustine is saying that was me. I was the Joker in the pear orchard.
In a way, yes, it's that same impulse. But there's a second, equally important layer to the pear tree incident, the gang.
The peer pressure aspect.
He is brutally honest about this. He says, I would not have done it alone. If he had been by himself, he says, the Theft would have had no flavor, would have been boring, but there was the itching of camaraderie, the rubbing together of guilty spirits.
He has an incredible line, "Oh, friendship all unfriendly."
Yes. And he analyzes how laughter works in a mob. Someone says, let's go do this, and you are ashamed to be the only one who doesn't go. You are, in his words, ashamed not to be shameless.
Wow.
He realizes that so much social bonding is built on shared transgression. We bond by excluding others or by breaking rules together. It creates this false, fragile intimacy.
So the pear tree isn't just about stolen fruit. It's a case study on the fact that we are capable of loving sin for its own sake, and we use our friends to validate and amplify that darkness.
Precisely. It strips away all our excuses. We can't say, oh, I only sinned because I was hungry or because I needed something. Augustine says, no, sometimes we sin because we like the thrill of the fall.
So leaving the pears behind, he grows up a bit and moves to Carthage for his higher education. And this is where the movie rating of his life changes from, say, PG to R Book 3 opens with that amazing line. I came to Carthage, where a cauldron of unholy loves bubbled all around me.
Carthage was the big city. It was the New York or the Las Vegas of the region. A port city, so it was vibrant, dangerous, intellectual, and incredibly sensual. And Augustine was ready for it.
He describes himself as in love with loving.
Amanza Mare, such a great phrase. I was in love with loving. He wasn't necessarily looking for a specific person, not at first. He was looking for the sensation of being in love.
The drama.
The drama. He had a famine inside him, he says. He hated security. He wanted the snares. He wanted to feel something intense, anything to drown out that inner restlessness we talked about earlier.
And he finds it. He starts a long-term relationship with a woman who we'll discuss later, but he also becomes completely obsessed with the theater. And this leads to another one of those brilliant psychological detours that Augustine loves so much. He calls it the paradox of tragedy.
Yes. He asks the simple question, why do we pay money to be made sad?
In real life, if we see someone suffering, if someone dies or gets their heart broken, we hate it. It's miserable. But we go to the theater, we sit there, and we weep for the characters, and we actually enjoy weeping. He calls it miserable madness.
He traces it back to that same love of loving. He argues that watching tragedy is a way to scratch an emotional itch without any of the real-world risk. It allows us to feel compassion for the characters on stage.
But he says this is dangerous. He calls it scratching a sore.
That's the image. You scratch it because it feels good in a perverse way, but what happens? It gets infected.
His argument is that this fake compassion actually kills real compassion. Is that right?
Exactly. If you spend all your emotional energy weeping for Hecuba on stage, you walk out of the theater feeling like a good person. Look how sensitive I am. But then when you walk out and see a real beggar on the street, you're numb. You've used up all your empathy on a fiction. It's emotional self-indulgence masquerading as virtue.
So while he's in Carthage, navigating this cauldron, he's also a student. And he runs into a group called the Wreckers.
The Eversores.
Yeah.
Literally. The overturners.
These guys sound like an absolute nightmare.
They were basically the domestic terrorists of the university. They would barge into classes, shout down professors, beat up freshmen, just break things for the fun of it. It was organized hooliganism with an intellectual pretense.
And what was Augustine's relationship to them?
He hung out with them. He's very clear that he wasn't one of them. He says he was too timid to do the worst of the wrecking, but he enjoyed the proximity. He liked being friends with the bad boys. It gave him status. But again, he felt that weird shame that he wasn't bad enough to be fully in their circle.
It's the pear tree dynamic all over again, the fear of being the good kid in a cool group.
It's the exact same psychology. But amidst all this chaos, the sex, the theater, the wreckers, he has his first major intellectual awakening. He's 19 years old. He's in his rhetoric class. And he picks up a book by Cicero called The Hortensius.
A book that, ironically, is now lost to history. We only really know about it because Augustine writes about it so movingly.
Correct. And it wasn't a story. It was an exhortation to philosophy. It was Cicero making a passionate argument. Wake up. Stop chasing money and fame and pleasure. Chase wisdom. That's the only thing worthy of the human soul.
And Augustine says it completely changed his prayers.
It did. Suddenly, all his ambition for becoming a rich, famous lawyer seemed cheap and tawdry. He says, I yearn for an immortality of wisdom with an incredible burning of the heart. It was the first time he looked up from the mud of Carthage and really saw the stars.
But there was a catch. Cicero was a pagan.
And that mattered to Augustine. Why? Because of his mother, Monica. She was a devout Christian. She had raised him with the name of Christ. He says that even in his wildest, most sinful days, this name of my Savior had been drunk in with my mother's milk. It was in his bones.
So he reads this beautiful, life-changing philosophy by Cicero, but he says, the name of Christ was not there.
And that absence bothered him deeply. He couldn't fully commit to a wisdom that didn't include that name. So logically, he decides to check out the Christian scriptures, the Bible.
He picks up the Bible, and he is deeply unimpressed.
He is a total rhetoric snob. You have to understand, he's been reading Cicero, whose Latin is polished, complex, majestic like a symphony. Then he picks up the Old Latin translation of the Bible. And it's clunky, it's humble, it's full of grammatically simple sentences. Jesus wept in the beginning.
He says his swelling pride rejected its simple style. He couldn't see the depth because he was so fixated on the unimpressive surface.
He has a great line. He says, I was not little enough to enter. The Bible, for him, is a door that requires you to bow down to enter. Augustine was standing tall, chest puffed out with his intellectual arrogance. He couldn't fit.
So rejecting the Bible but still wanting truth and wisdom, he falls into the arms of the Manichaeans. Now, we really need to unpack this, because usually when people hear Manichaeans, they think weird ancient cult. But Augustine was a genius. Why did he fall for this for 9 years?
That is the crucial question. And the answer is that Manichaeism wasn't just a cult. It was a complete theory of everything. And it appealed to Augustine for two very specific reasons that satisfied both his intellectual and his moral needs at the time.
Okay, let's start with the intellectual appeal.
The Manichaeans marketed themselves as the party of reason. They mocked the Christians for saying, you must have faith. The Manichaeans said, we don't demand faith, we have knowledge. They promised a scientific, rational explanation of the entire cosmos.
And their core explanation was a radical dualism.
Yes. They believed the universe was a constant battlefield between two equal, uncreated, eternal substances, a kingdom of light, good, and a kingdom of darkness, evil. And crucially, both were physical realities.
And this solved the problem of evil for Augustine.
It solved it beautifully for him. The Christians said there is one good God who made everything. So Augustine, the philosophy student, asked the obvious question. If God is good and all-powerful and made everything, where did evil come from? Did God make evil?
A question that still troubles people today.
Absolutely. The Christians struggled to answer that in a way he could grasp. But the Manichaeans had a simple, easy answer. God didn't make evil. Evil is a foreign invasion. It's a separate dark substance that attacked the kingdom of light.
That's very neat. It gets God off the hook.
Gets God off the hook. And even more importantly for Augustine, it gets him off the hook. This is the moral appeal.
Okay.
The Manichaeans taught that human beings have two souls. A light soul, which is a particle of the good God, and a dark soul, which is a particle of the evil substance. So when Augustine sinned, when he felt lust or anger or pride, he could say, it wasn't really me doing it, it was the alien dark nature inside me.
The devil made me do it, but literally, the dark matter made me do it.
Exactly. He calls it a sweet trap. It allowed him to keep his sins while feeling intellectually superior and morally blameless. He didn't have to confess his guilt, he just had to lament the existence of this evil matter that was afflicting him.
But some of their specific beliefs were, well, they were bizarre. We have to talk about the figs.
We do. The fig doctrine. This is where the intense materialism of their worldview gets wild. Since they believed good was a physical substance, light, they believed that divine light particles were trapped in all plants and fruit.
So when you look at a fig, you're looking at bits of God trapped inside.
Yes. And they believed that only the elect, the highest level of Manichaean saints, had digestive systems pure enough to liberate that light. So if a normal person ate a fig, the light stayed trapped. But if a saint ate the fig, his body would act like a filter, and he would liberate the divine particles, which he would then breathe out in his burps and his prayers.
Augustine mocks this relentlessly later in the book. He imagines a saint burping out angels.
He does. He finds it completely absurd in hindsight. But at the time, he bought it. Or at least he wanted to buy it because it fit his materialistic worldview. He couldn't imagine a spiritual God, so a God made of tiny light particles trapped in fruit actually made a weird kind of sense to him.
So for 9 years, he's a Manichaean. He's teaching rhetoric, and he goes back to his hometown of Tagaste to set up a school. And then we hit book 4, the death of his friend.
This is one of the most raw, honest, and painful descriptions of grief ever written.
He doesn't name the friend, which is interesting. But they grew up together, they were the same age, they were both obsessed with the same things. Augustine uses that famous phrase, they had one soul in 2 bodies.
The friend falls sick with a fever. He becomes unconscious. And while he's out cold, his family, who are Christian, have him baptized. Augustine is there, and he just laughs about it. He thinks it's a silly, empty superstition. He assumes that when his friend wakes up, they'll both mock this ridiculous ritual together.
Because that's not what happens at all.
No. The friend wakes up, and Augustine makes a joke about the baptism. And the friend looks at him with absolute horror. He recoils from Augustine as if he were an enemy. He tells Augustine that if he wants to remain his friend, he must never speak like that again.
That must have shaken Augustine to his core.
It did. And a few days later, while Augustine is away on a trip, the friend has a relapse and dies.
And Augustine just completely disintegrates.
Completely. He says his native town became a torture room. Every street, every corner where they used to hang out, now just screamed the absence of his friend. He says, I became a great riddle to myself.
He talks about that feeling of being half. He says he hated living because he was only half a man, but he feared dying because then the friend, who still lived in his memory, would be fully and finally dead.
It's such a profound analysis of attachment and loss. Augustine realizes, in hindsight, why he was so utterly shattered. He had, in his own words, poured his soul onto sand.
Pouring your soul onto sand. What does he mean by that?
He argues that if you love a mortal thing as if it were immortal, you are setting yourself up for guaranteed destruction. The friend was human. Humans die. Augustine had staked his entire happiness on something that, by its very nature, could be taken away in an instant. He realizes that unless you love things in God, who is eternal and can't be taken away, you will always eventually be heartbroken.
During this period of grief, he's grasping for control, for answers, and he turns to astrology, the mathematicians, as they were called then.
Yes, he wanted to know the future. He wanted to find some hidden order in the chaos of life.
But there's a great scene where he talks to this sharp old doctor named Vindicianus. Vindicianus was a proconsul, a really smart, respected guy, and he tells Augustine, look, I used to study this stuff. It's garbage.
Vindicianus gives him the classic argument of chance. He says, Augustine, if you open a book of poetry at random, sometimes you land on a verse that fits your situation perfectly. That's not the stars. That's just coincidence. He argues that astrologers make so many vague predictions that eventually, by pure statistical probability, they're bound to get some right.
This plants a seed of doubt. Augustine doesn't quit astrology immediately. He's far too stubborn for that, but the crack is there. At the same time, he's trying to build his career. He writes a treatise on beauty called De Pulchro et Apto, on the beautiful and the fitting.
And he dedicates it to a famous Roman orator, Herius, a man whom he had never even met.
This is pure vanity, isn't it? Hey, famous guy, look at my brilliant book.
It is, and he reflects on this with shame later. He asks himself, why did I love this guy? And he realized he loved Herius not because he knew him or his character, but because the crowd applauded him. He was loving the reputation, not the man. He was just chasing the reflection of fame.
So he's restless and grieving in Tagaste. He moves back to the bigger city of Carthage. And he's starting to have serious doubts about the Manichaeans. They've been telling him for years. I know these questions are hard, Augustine, but just wait for Faustus. Faustus is our great bishop. When Faustus comes, he will explain everything.
Faustus is the messiah figure for them, the great and powerful Oz.
And in Book V, Faustus finally arrives in Carthage.
And Augustine is charmed at first. Faustus is a lovely man. He's soft-spoken, polite, incredibly eloquent. Augustine says he served the meat of his discourse on fine china. A beautiful speaker.
But Augustine is a hunter now. He has real questions. He wants to know about the astronomical claims the Manichaeans make, which he knows don't match the science of the day. He wants to know about the philosophical contradictions, so he sits Faustus down and pushes him.
And Faustus just collapses. Not angrily, not defensively. But he admits, I don't know. He admits he hasn't read the scientific and philosophical texts. He says he just knows grammar and literature.
Augustine actually respects his honesty.
He does. He says he likes the man more, but he respects the sect a whole lot less. He has a major realization. Eloquence is not truth. You can speak the truth with a stutter, and you can speak beautiful lies with perfect diction. The spell of Manichaeism is broken. The scientific religion turned out to be scientifically illiterate.
So he's spiritually homeless. He's not really a Manichaean anymore, but he's definitely not a Christian. And he's getting tired of Carthage. The wreckers are destroying his classroom. He hears that in Rome, the students are disciplined. They sit quietly and respect their teachers.
It sounds like an academic paradise to him. So he decides to pack up and move to Rome. But he has a problem. A big one. Monica.
His mother. She suspects he's leaving. She clings to him. She refuses to let him go without her. She follows him down to the docks.
And this is where Augustine the Saint behaves like an absolute villain. It's genuinely hard to read. He tells her, "Mother, go and wait in this nearby shrine to St. Cyprian. I'm just going to say goodbye to a friend whose ship is about to sail."
It's a complete lie.
A flat-out cruel lie. While she is on her knees in the shrine praying for him not to leave, he gets on the boat, the wind picks up, and he sails away. He leaves his own mother weeping on the shore.
He says she was wild with grief. She was accusing him of deception and cruelty. It's such a pivotal moment. He's literally running away from her piety, running away from his past, trying to reinvent himself in the capital of the world.
But the great irony is, Rome completely rejects him.
He gets there and almost immediately falls deathly ill. He thinks he's going to die.
He almost does. He fears dying in his sins, but he recovers. And when he finally starts teaching, he discovers the Roman scam.
The students, they don't riot like the Carthaginians.
No, they're perfectly polite, but they have a system. They attend classes for a whole term, soak up all the knowledge, and then right before the fees are due, they all conspire to transfer to another teacher en masse so they never have to pay.
It's academic fraud.
It is. And Augustine is furious. He's broke, he's sick, he hates the students. Rome is a total bust.
And then fate intervenes, or as he would say, providence. The prefect of Milan, a man named Symmachus, sends a request to Rome. He needs a professor of rhetoric for Milan, which was the imperial capital at the time.
It's a huge opportunity. Augustine applies. He gives a speech, he wins the job. This is the move that changes history. He travels north to Milan.
And who is the bishop of Milan?
A man named Ambrose. Ambrose is a titan. He was a former provincial governor who was so respected that the people of Milan literally acclaimed him bishop by popular demand. He was an intellectual match for Augustine, and then some. He spoke Greek and Latin fluently, he knew philosophy inside and out, and he was a powerful, commanding orator.
So Augustine goes to hear him speak, but he's very clear about his motive. I didn't go to learn what he said. I went to hear how he said it.
He was just auditing the technique. He wanted to see if Ambrose's rhetorical fame was justified. He says, "I hung on his words, but I was careless and contemptuous of the matter."
But the message, the content, it started sneaking in past his defenses.
The words I loved brought into my mind by and by the things I ignored. He couldn't separate the beautiful form from the powerful content. And Ambrose provided the one missing piece that Augustine desperately needed, the allegorical key.
We need to explain this. What exactly is the allegorical key?
Okay, so remember, Augustine hated the Old Testament because it seemed so crude to him. It talked about God having hands or feet, or God being angry or regretful. The Manichaeans mocked this relentlessly. They said, "See, the Christian God is just a big man in the sky. He has a body."
And Ambrose says,
Ambrose quotes St. Paul, "The letter kills, but the Spirit gives life." He explains that these passages are not meant to be taken literally. They are allegories. When the Bible talks about God's hand, it means his power. When it talks about his eyes, it means his omnipresent knowledge.
it's a metaphor. It's symbolic language.
Exactly. But to Augustine, this was an earth-shattering revelation. He realized the Bible wasn't a crude book for peasants. It was a veiled, sophisticated book for the wise. Ambrose showed him that there was a profound spiritual depth beneath the surface letter. And this just dissolved his primary intellectual objection to the faith.
The Catholic faith was actually intellectually defensible.
Suddenly, yes. So he becomes a catechumen, a learner in the church. He officially stops being a Manichaean. He's in neutral territory. And this brings us to Book 6 and the deep struggle for the good life. And guess who shows up in Milan?
It has to be Monica. She's back.
You cannot stop this woman. She followed him across the Mediterranean Sea, and when he tells her, "Look, I'm not a Manichaean anymore, but I'm not a full Catholic yet," she is totally calm.
She doesn't panic.
Not at all. She just says, "I believe in Christ that before I die, I will see you a faithful Catholic." She is certain.
She's playing the long game. But there's a fascinating little scene here that shows just how much power and influence Ambrose had. Monica goes to the shrines of the martyrs in Milan, and she brings a basket of wine and cakes.
This is the African custom. It was like having a picnic with the dead saints. You drink a little wine in their honor, you leave some for them.
But the doorkeeper at the shrine stops her. The bishop forbids this.
Ambrose had banned it. 2 reasons. It looked too much like pagan ancestor worship, and, more practically, people were just getting drunk at the tombs. Now, Monica was a devout woman, very attached to her traditions. With anyone else, she might have argued. But the moment she hears it's Ambrose's order, she just drops it, puts the basket away.
Augustine is amazed by her obedience. He says, "She obediently submitted." It shows her incredible respect for Ambrose's authority, but also her own spiritual maturity.
Meanwhile, Augustine is still climbing the greasy pole of Roman politics. He is preparing a panegyric, a formal praise speech for the emperor, who was probably Valentinian II at the time.
And this is Book 6's famous beggar scene. Augustine is walking through the streets of Milan. He's rehearsing the speech in his head, and let's be very clear, the speech is full of lies.
Total lies. He knows he is going to praise the emperor for virtues he doesn't possess. The audience knows they are lies. The emperor knows they're lies, but everyone will clap anyway. And Augustine is a nervous wreck. He's anxious, sweating, terrified of failure.
And in that state, he sees a beggar.
A destitute man on the side of the road. He's drunk. He's joking with his friends. He's laughing. He seems genuinely happy.
And Augustine just stops dead in his tracks. He turns to his friends and says, essentially, look at this guy.
It is a moment of total existential crisis for him. He says, I am dragging this heavy load of ambition, whipped by my own desires, terrified and miserable. And this beggar has already achieved what I am striving for with all this pain, happiness.
The beggar got it with a few coins for a cup of wine. Augustine is selling his soul for it, and it's only bringing him anxiety.
And he analyzed it. He says, if you ask me if I'd rather be merry or fearful, I obviously say merry. But if you ask if I'd rather be me or the beggar, I'd still choose me. He realizes his pride, his learned misery, is the only thing keeping him from admitting that the beggar has won. The beggar has joy. Augustine has only anxiety.
It's the classic emptiness of worldly success. But he's not the only one in his circle who's struggling. His best friend Alypius is there too. We have to talk about Alypius and the gladiators.
This is a masterclass in the psychology of addiction. Alypius was a good, virtuous guy, a lawyer. He hated the gladiator games. He thought they were barbaric and evil.
But one day in Rome, some of his friends basically bully him into going. They physically drag him to the Colosseum.
And Alypius is very cocky about it. He says, you can drag my body there, but my mind will be absent. I will keep my eyes closed. I will conquer the spectacle.
So they sit down, the games start, the crowd roars.
Someone gets wounded,
Ah.
and the roar is deafening. And Alypius is overcome with curiosity. He thinks to himself, I'm strong enough. I'll just take a quick peek to see what happened, and then I'll despise it and close my eyes again.
The fatal peak.
Fatal peek. He opens his eyes. He sees the blood. And Augustine says, he was struck in the soul more grievously than the gladiator in the body. He didn't turn away. He drank down the madness. He became fixated. He started shouting with the crowd. He became one of the mob.
He went in a skeptic, and he left an addict.
A full-blown addict. It's a powerful lesson on the influence of environment. You think you are an individual with a strong will, but if you put yourself in the arena nearly always wins.
So you have Augustine, the ambitious wreck, Alypius, the recovering addict, and their friend Nebridius. They're all miserable and searching, so they come up with a plan, the commune.
The 10 Men Project.
Mm-hmm.
It's so idealistic and naive. They decided they would pool all their money, no rich, no poor. 2 men would handle the shopping and logistics each year on a rotating basis, so the other 8 could just sit in the library all day and seek wisdom.
It sounds like a philosophical fraternity house. Why did it fail so spectacularly?
The same reason these utopian plans always fail. Real life. They ask one simple question. What will our wives say?
The wives.
Some of the men were already married, and some, like Augustine, wanted to be. And they realized in that instant that you can't just opt out of society when you have attachments and responsibilities. The whole grand plan collapsed in a single meeting.
Which brings us to the final and most painful thread of Book 6, Augustine's relationship status. He is being pressured by Monica to marry. A proper Catholic wife with money and connections would help his career.
But he already has a wife, in all but name. He has lived faithfully with one woman for over 10 years. They have a son together, Adeodatus. But she is of a lower social class. She was his concubine. In Roman law and society, he could not marry her without ruining his career prospects.
This is the part of the book that makes modern readers, and I have to think ancient ones too, just want to scream at him. To clear the way for this new, socially advantageous marriage, he sends her away.
He sends her back to Africa, and the description is absolutely heart-wrenching. He says she was torn from his side as a hindrance to his marriage. And then he says his heart, which was attached to her, was torn and wounded and bleeding.
And what about her reaction?
She vows to God never to know another man. She accepts her dismissal with this terrifying kind of loyalty and piety. She leaves their son, Adeodatus, with Augustine. She is the silent, dignified victim of his ambition.
And Augustine. Does he at least stay faithful to her memory while he waits for his new, respectable bride?
Not for a second. The bride that Monica has arranged for him is only 10 years old. The legal age for marriage was 12. He has to wait 2 years. And Augustine writes, I was not a lover of marriage, but a slave of lust. He couldn't wait 2 years.
So he gets another mistress.
Immediately. While his faithful partner of a decade is living a life of celibacy in Africa, and his future child bride is playing with dolls, Augustine procures another woman to satisfy his urges in the interim.
He is at the absolute bottom here, morally speaking.
He is. This is the pit. He has rejected the intellectual errors of the Manichaeans. He knows intellectually that the Catholic truth is likely the right one. He knows the beggar on the street is happier than he is, but he is morally paralyzed. He cannot stop.
He prays that infamous prayer, grant me chastity and continence, but not yet.
Said Nolimoto. But not just now. He wants to be good, but he loved his old self and his habits too much to let it die. He is bound, as he says, by the iron chain of his own will.
And that is where Book 6 leaves us. He is 30 years old. He is standing on the edge of the cliff. He knows he needs to jump into a new life. But he is utterly terrified.
He is stuck in the habit. He knows the truth, but his will is broken. He can't make himself do what he knows is right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the first half of the Confessions, what's the big takeaway here? It really feels like we've just watched a man systematically strip away every single excuse he has.
That is exactly it. The journey of books I through 6 is the journey of losing your alibis. He lost the alibi of childhood innocence when he analyzed the jealous baby.
Right.
He lost the alibi of utility or need when he analyzed the pear tree. He sinned for fun. He lost the alibi of Manichaeism, the idea that the dark nature made me do it.
Yeah.
And finally, he lost the alibi of intellectual ignorance because Ambrose answered all his questions about the faith.
He has absolutely nowhere left to hide.
Correct. He is finally, for the first time in his life, face to face with the real problem. The problem isn't the stars or the dark matter or the Bible's clunky grammar. The problem is Augustine. The problem is the human heart that knows the good but freely wills the bad.
It's a terrifying place to be, but it's also the only place where real change can actually begin.
You have to hit the bottom before you can push off.
So here's a thought we want to leave you with today. Augustine was stuck because he was terrified to let go of his glittering fantasies, his career ambitions, his sexual habits. Even though he knew they were making him miserable, he was clinging to the very thing that was killing him.
And we all do this, in big ways and small ways.
We do. So maybe ask yourself, what is the glittering fantasy or the habit in your own life that you know is empty, you know isn't serving you, but you are just terrified to walk away from?
And what would happen if you finally stopped saying, not yet?
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.